I just hit start streaming. Sometimes YouTube lags by like a minute or two. So if you don't see live now, when you look it up, just refresh it. So yeah, .word games on YouTube, DOTWARE, and then you want that.
And if you like
So you can see we were doing destructible meshes earlier today. So I showed how to take a 3D object and then turn it into something that destroys itself. So you can see I'm sliding it and it breaks into pieces, right? So Unreal has a built-in system for that. What I did is I clicked this thing called Enable Impact Damage. That means if it collides with anything in the world, like a physics collision, it'll then break. So what I did is I dragged that into my world there. Clearly I was explaining something because it's doing that. And I raised it up high, and then I enabled physics so that it would fall. And when it falls and hits the ground, this 3D mesh should break into pieces. So that's what we did there. Who's on the live stream, by the way? Anybody on it yet? Should be up. So see that? Fell. And I played a couple times, and it just cracks. So I do it again. Crack. And this one's actually much more subtle. See? But you can still see the cracks in it. It didn't explode. And there's ways to like manage how much weight each piece has, etc. So that was a pretty good destruction. That was a pretty subtle one. Just 2 cracks. There you go. We did that. What else did we do? And all this stuff's on YouTube, so I may or may not get to this kind of thing, but it's all on there now. This is cool. I created a day-night cycle. So if you look at the shadow going on the stairs. It's getting longer. It's because the sun, I made it so the sun actually moves across the sky slowly. So we did that also today. We did that in blueprint code, something called a timeline. See the shadows. So that sort of thing. Okay. So by now the stream should be up. So if you go to .wargames and then you find the channel name or whatever, you click on that channel, and it could be probably in uploads, usually where it appears. Yeah, so in uploads, there's something called live now, so there's 3 people watching. 3 of us are watching. So click on that, and then that's live, my screen. Okay. So it's in the upload section. If you don't see it, like I said, just refresh, and it'll come up. So that's going to show you all the stuff in on my screen. So when I'm showing stuff. Oh yeah, what else did we do? We did a really cool sci-fi theme thing. Sort of the theme of the day for me was sci-fi. So I created like this cool starry thing in one of our worlds. And taking a flying template, which you guys have, and flying a ship around and making like a base, and then flying to and from to one of these bases, making it look like space, etc. So that's some of the stuff we did. This I was just doing, and I wasn't explaining because it's a little bit more complex. It's called materials. You can edit materials. Most of you know what materials are by now, but you can actually make your own. So that's what I was doing. Yeah. So really cool stuff. As far as today, what I'd like to start doing with you, since there are so few people in here who are in my class already, is I'm going to show you the super awesome, crazy, quick way to make 3D models in Unreal. So go ahead, and all of you should be on the new project or open project area. So I'm just going to go File, New Project. So it looks something like this. We have different engine versions, so yours might look slightly different. But generally, you have this thing called Blueprint. and it will be giving you all these different templates, and you want to select the third person template for today. So with third person template selected, go ahead and make sure with starter content is checked. Okay, so we don't have to add it later, and then hit create project. And it'll take you guys a minute, so while it loads, I'll just reiterate what I went over last time, what these things are. We're looking at the center area. This is called the viewport. This is where all level design happens. To move around the viewport, you hold down the right mouse button and move your mouse around. And that lets you move your camera around, move your view. Right? Look up, look down, and that's just by holding down the right mouse button. With your left hand, you use W to go forward while holding down right mouse button. A and D go side to side, S goes backwards. Okay, just imagine that those are forward arrow keys, but for your left hand, the left side of the keyboard. WASD. Okay. And of course, if you let go, it's not going to do anything. You have to hold down right mouse button whenever you're moving. And then, of course, I've told you all of this before. You click on an object, you get these arrows. If you hover over an arrow, it turns yellow. That means it's highlighted. If you click and drag, then it will move in the direction that the arrow is pointing. That's how you move objects. There's a toolbar in the upper left of that viewport, and those are all your different options for moving things. The next option over is this. You click it, and you get rotation options. So you click and drag those, and you can rotate objects. And then the third one is for scaling objects. So that's changing the size of something. Okay. And you can just switch between those. And then usually I go through these one by one. I won't now, but remember this one, this is the 10, the first one, this is for grid snapping. So I change it to a higher number. The space with which something jumps when you try to move it to its new location increases. Right? And the same for angles. And the last number is for the speed of your camera, because this might be really slow if you have a really big world and you want to fly around faster. Turn this up to a 5 or 6, and all of a sudden it's much easier to navigate. And then on the left, always talk about this, modes panel. This is for dragging any kind of objects in your scene. Like I could drag out a light. And then details panel on the lower right is where you use that all the time to change the values of any object. So there's a value here called intensity. If I turn it up, the light gets brighter. If I change the color, the light changes the color. That all happens in details. And then bottom here is the content browser. This is also for getting new objects, things like materials and stuff. Yeah, sign out. And then in the upper right is just the world outliner, which is useful for two reasons. One, if you want to find an object in there, you just go through the list, double click the object, and it takes you to it. Okay, and then the second reason it's useful is good for deleting things. Find the thing you need, delete it, rather than finding it in the world. So that's that. That's the basics of Unreal. Now, let's get into the good, juicy stuff. Let's make some models. So this is all going to start in the content browser down here. All of you added starter content when you created the project, so we just need to find our starter content folder. So go ahead and click the button on the left of filters. It's a tiny little icon just to the left of filters. You click that, and it's going to expand your hierarchy, and you can see all the different folders in your project. And you want to go to the starter content folder. So opening starter content, you want to open the materials folder. Actually, no, we're not opening that. Go to the props folder. Props. And yes, the students, sorry for who've already had me, we're going to make the television set just because it's just so easy to make. I'm going to use these pre-made props, these pre-made shapes, to make something new, right? So go ahead and drag out, you're in the props folder of starter content already, right? You see all these props, these 3D objects. Drag out this one called SM corner frame, drag that out into your world. And make it a little bigger, maybe scale it up by 3 or 4 times bigger. Yeah, I like that. Then if you look, you also have something in here called SM window frame. So if I drag that out into here, actually I don't think I want door frame. Okay, grab the door frame one. And that one's way too big, so make it shrunk, make it smaller. Make it like that. And I like that. Now it's a good frame for the kind of the front of a television set, an old television set. Yeah. Then you also have this object in here called glass, SM window glass. I'm going to drag that out. And that definitely needs to be made smaller, so you change the shape of it. We're just using a scale tool, right? And it's okay if this isn't perfect. You can come back and do stuff with it later. So I'm trying to center it. Yeah, like that. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. So then the other thing I'd like to do is there's something here called SM pillar frame. If I drag that out, it's this really big thing. I want to make antennas out of this. Well, how do you make an antenna? It's just humongous. So you could try the scale tool, but the smallest scale it's going to let you do before rescaling up, because you go negative, is going to be this, which is way too big for an antenna. In which case, what we want to do is go over to our details panel and further just type in the numbers we want for the new scale. So in details right here, it says scale. Is these numbers. Mine say 0.25. I'm going to change mine to 0.05 for the X, and then for Y, same deal. And so now that makes it really thin. It's a little bit too tall, so for Z, I'm going to make it go 0.1. Yeah, that looks good. 0.1. Now I'll move that over to wherever I think looks appropriate. I want to rotate it, because that's kind of what antennas do. And then I want to make a copy of it. Remember, you can make a copy by either doing Command-C, Command-V, or you could hold Alt and then drag, and it'll make a copy, which is a faster way of doing it. That's how I almost always do it. And then I got my antenna in there. It's looking pretty nifty. It looks pretty good. And the last thing I want to do with this television-looking thing is I want to make its materials look a little bit more television-like. So I'm going to go into my materials folder. There's some good stuff for that. There's one called Chrome. It looks really nice. For the wires, maybe I'll make those be copper or gold or something. Actually, the tech material doesn't look too bad. And it's so small, you can't really tell. I'll do that. And there you have it. However, this isn't really useful to us as a new model, because it's just a bunch of separate models put together, you know. So what we want to do is we want to combine them and save it as a new 3D model. And all 3D models generally are saved as static meshes. So whenever you see, that's why everything is like SM underscore, then the name of the thing, that stands for static mesh. Okay. So how do we combine it? It's real simple. You're going to click all the things that you want to combine. So you want to click it, and then you want to hold Control, and that will let you select more than one thing as you keep hitting Control. And if you click the floor accidentally, and it's like, oh no, I don't want to do that, just click the floor again while holding Control, and it'll undo it. Oh, see, I just did something weird, so I hit Command-Z to undo whatever I just did. Command-Z, Command-Z. I just moved something weird. Alright, so for example, I just moved everything off by like whatever from the box. So I'm going to hold Control and click and drag it back over. So, there we go. Okay, moving on. So you get your TV. So we want to select everything. So back to what we were doing. Control, click, the frame, the glass, each antenna, the back part. Okay, good. All right, they're all selected. Now go ahead and right-click on any of the selected meshes, the selected objects, So I'll just, in the middle of my TV, right click, okay? And once you've done that, scroll to the bottom where there's this thing that says merge actors. Merge actors. Sort of towards the bottom. And click merge actors. And you have all these settings that come up. You don't have to touch any of these settings. They're fine as they are. You just hit the merge actors button in the lower right. It's going to ask you, what do you want to name it? Since I like being organized, I'm going to name mine SM_TV_01. And then I'm going to hit save. And I made a mistake. See, I actually merged the floor. That's funny, I talked about doing that. So if I can see my TV, but if I drag it out, it's the TV plus an entire floor. So I don't want that. So I'm going to have to try this again. So again, doing it again. Control, select everything. That should be good. Right click, select merge actors. Don't have to mess with any settings, just click the merge actors on the right. I'm going to name it SM_TV_, this time 02, since I already have one called 01. Hit save, and now you can see it previewed there in the content browser. You have this thing. Go ahead and drag it out. It's like, there it is. There's our television set. So that's the ultra super crazy fast way of making models. It would take way longer to do that in any sort of 3D modeling program. This only really works for things like props and television sets and buildings and things like that. If you're trying to do character modeling, you've got to do that in some other modeling program. Unreal's won't let you really do that sort of thing. But as far as this is concerned, it's a way to go. Yeah. I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm merging. So do that with anything that you make in your world. You're like, I want to save this as its own thing. Do that. So while we're on the topic of destructible meshes, or just meshes in general, but we brought it up, let's try making a destructible mesh out of this TV. I've never done that with a shape like this, so we'll see how this works out. To do a destructible mesh, you right-click, in the content browser, you find the mesh. This won't work in the viewport. It's going to be in the content browser. You right-click on the mesh. By the way, mesh is just my word. It's the word for a 3D object. Right-click and do. You want to do. Oh, okay, so this is what keeps happening. If you guys probably have the destructible system in yours by default, but if you don't, follow along. I just have to add it via plugin. It's real easy. You have an older version, even older version of Unreal, and in the older versions they kept that in, and in the newer versions, to make the engine a little bit lighter, they turned it off by default, so you just have to enable it. So if I go to settings right here in the middle top, plugins, and you want to go down to an area called physics, okay? And physics, you want to see that apex destruction is enabled. See, mine's not enabled, there's no check mark, so I click the check mark. It's going to tell me, okay, you need to restart. I click restart the editor. It's going to ask me to save. I hit save, and then we wait. You probably don't have to do that, but check, make sure it's enabled. All right, so I'm back in my editor, and now if I right-click on this 3D object, this mesh, you'll see about 3 options down, I have an option called Create Destructible Mesh. So click that, and we want to drag the tab up all the way so we have a full view of the window, and you can see our mesh in like this dark room here, right, where we're about to destroy it. And in the upper left, you have a button called Fracture Mesh. You want to click that, and it's going to fracture it. And you can preview what the fracture pieces look like with this slider at the top there, top middle, called Explode Amount. So if you slide that around, you can actually preview what it would look like for the TV to be smashed into pieces. Right? And then it comes all the way perfectly back at 0 again, which looks really cool. So if we want to see this actually break in game, all you got to do is there's a check mark right here called Enable Impact Damage. Check that to true. Okay, good. Good. Hit save on that. And if you go back to the front of Unreal, you'll see there's all these. You'll see your content browser. You have your original TV, and then you have one that says SMTV, whatever it's called, and then underscore DM. That stands for destructible mesh. Right? And it has a different color. It's like than the other ones as well. If I drag that into my world, I'm going to do that. Drag it in my world. And I'm going to drag it up high, just like I did with those stairs in that one video. And I'm going to, if I hit play right now, nothing's going to happen because gravity has been enabled. So it's just a floating TV. So the last thing I want to do is with that TV selected, go down to the physics part of its details. And the very top of the physics category, just put the check mark on simulate physics. And now if hit play, TV smash. Oh, that looks really good. Okay. It falls apart and it breaks. I'm going to make a couple. I'm going to duplicate that. So I have a couple TVs falling from different heights and smashing, because that would be cool. And we'll have one coming down from the stairs, falling onto the stairs. From really high up. Okay. And I have this thing that says shaders compiling. I'm just going to wait for that, because that's the materials, right? And I want to see what that looks like with the glass and everything breaking. It's got its chrome material on. There's waiting glass, it looks like. Okay, I'm going to hit play. I'm going to do play in a big editor window so we can see it. And, oh yeah, there. Try that again so we can get a little faster. And there's all my broken TV pieces. So that's a little bit about meshes. That's the mesh system, destructible mesh system, etc. All right, what do you guys want to know about? Any questions? Yeah. The damn paparazzi. Always want to know. My upcoming game. I'll open my upcoming game. Talk about what? One that's what? I'm sorry. Set in. Yeah, set in Egypt. Yeah, I'll open that. I know. So I've been working on the gameplay trail. Here's the thing: the gameplay keeps changing. I've gone through a bunch of, and I was thinking about maybe doing a more in-depth explanation for you guys when we get to like maybe more design lecture topics, since everything's been so practical so far, in the engine doing the work. But yeah, so the gameplay keeps changing so profoundly that every time I record something, it's outdated in like a week. It's like I can't show that anymore. I'll give you a perfect example. So it used to be that when buildings were constructed, you'd place a building on a landscape, right? Like an obelisk or something. And I had a material and that material had an effect on it that would cause the obelisk to appear to grow, right? So it would start as like a little block, it would float upwards. So that looked fine and dandy, but then I discovered that I could do a better system where I replace static meshes with taller and taller versions of themselves. And not only that, I could build, for example, a statue and have it be pulled on ropes. So the statue would be carved and then sit under the sand and then literally be hauled on ropes, and it was into its proper place. And it was so satisfying to watch. I knew immediately that everything that had been designed before it could not be shown in the trailer, because this would be the new system. So that's one of many examples where it's like I record something and then, gosh darn it, it's like it's changed already. But on that note, here's a little preview you can get of that. So they mentioned it's a city builder. set in ancient Egypt, where you play Pharaoh of Egypt. It's very much a role-playing game disguised as a city builder. That is to say, most people who play city building RTS games, it's about, what is it about? It's about, managing an economy, collecting resources, doing that sort of thing, which this game is about. But it sort of stops there. You kind of are an anonymous architect, anonymous city architect. Whereas my game is all about what does it mean to rule Egypt? Who are you? Because the Egyptians were interesting. They considered their king to actually be a god, the god Horus incarnate. So it was a theocracy in many ways. And yeah, you can see this is an experimental map, so I'm experimenting with a system called culling. So you can see I have all these meshes turning on and off like that. Right, this is for performance. We're at a performance stage of the game. If I go down here, you can see people doing their Egyptian thing, being all Egyptian, talking, hanging out. These guys doing their thing. Here in the plaza, of course, we got Pharaoh, right? And you can build buildings. So let's see, what building is this? This is the tax collection building. So if I want to build a tax collection building, I place that there. There's a sand effect that pops up, right? And that building starts generating taxes for you. Right here, this is a poultry vendor, I believe. Yeah, yes, you are. Yeah, you're playing as Pharaoh. So like any city building game, it has this traditional bird's eye view, but I made it so that you can go in and play as him and run around your world, which is pretty unique for this type of game, but really fun to do, and no loading screen either for that. Here's another vendor, and you place that. And maybe you want to do temples and stuff. I'm testing things with different sizes right now. Statue of Anubis. Now these guys are, again, this is an experimental map, so they're all turned off by default, but normally when you build something, they go running from wherever they are on the landscape to go find whichever buildings are there that need to be built based on their priority and based on their proximity. So they won't run off to some far off building, even if it was built first, if there's one standing right in front of them, unless the proximity was high. Trees and stuff, right? Oh yeah, the Nile floods, just like in real Egypt, and then that's when your farms can grow. You see the Nile there. And so again, normally this culling, where the objects are disappearing, is going to happen a lot farther away from the camera, but it's currently being tested, which is why you can see that. So yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff, features and things, but I can show you a little bit how the code works or whatever if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll answer other questions. Questions? Anybody? Yeah, over there? Uh-huh. So you want it to be so that if the player walks on something that it starts to crack or whatever? Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So if I were going to do that, what I would do is, let's see if I have a destructible system in this, on this version of the editor. You would want... Well, you definitely would want something called impulse damage, and you can have the player cause impulse damage. Let me just go back to my last project. I'm going to go to the sci-fi game from today. But yeah, when you're in the destructible menu, on the right, there's all these settings. And you want to make sure that the setting that's enabled is the one that says apply impulse damage. And usually what you'll do is if your player like has a sword or something, you'll make sure that that sword in the physics section says, hey, apply impulse damage. And if that's checked by default, anything like a destructible mesh that says it can receive impulse damage will then be able to. So in this version, I have to put in the destructible plugin, so settings, plugins, physics, check mark, apex destruction, hit restart now. And as far as like you were asking how to make it destruct just as the player is walking on it, so you can vary the amount of the impulse damage required to break something. So that's like making something, for example, thin ice, right? You want thin ice so it starts to crack and crumble as soon as you just step on it. So you can lower that. So actually, a perfect example, I have a floor here called template floor. So we'll make a destructible mesh out of that. So right click it, create destructible mesh, opens up the mesh editor, make it big here, and then I want to fracture it, so hit fracture mesh, and that's pretty good looking as a fractured mesh. You can increase the number of fractures in this thing called cell site count, so right now it's 25 fractures. Just know that the more you do it, the more your game's going to lag. Right? So I'm fine with that for now. And then I want to make sure enable impact damage is here. And see, when you hover over enable impact damage, it tells you, it says whether to apply damage to destructible when colliding with an object. That's what happens, you know. And then right here, impact damage controls how much damage is applied upon collision. So you would increase this, I believe, in order to make it a very weak object that, like, if you breathe on it, right, it breaks. That's the idea. So I am on a flying template, so I'll see if I can fly into it. I won't be able to walk if I can break it. No. Oh, yeah, start breaking. Let's do something cool. So we have glass material. So let's change this to, I'm going to change this material in cube material to glass. It's going to take a minute though. So the hope is when I fly into this, it'll break. So it breaks, but it kind of takes too long to break, so it's too strong. Oh, it says right here, custom impact resistance. By default, objects that collide with destructibles will bounce back. Well, that's what's happening to my player, which is the ship. Your player might be the guy walking, but we don't want that to happen. Custom resistance allows for finer control of how much a destructible pushes back against a colliding object. So I want this, since it's going to be glass, to have like no impact resistance. So I'm going to change this to 0.01. And the glass material is still compiling. We'll see. Hopefully, if I crack into this as it is, it'll break immediately. That's the goal. I actually am going to increase the cell site count from 25, let's say, to 40. I'm going to hit fracture again. I'm going to go to 50. Fracture again. Okay, then there's this damage spread, which controls how easily damage spreads. All chunks will take damage. Full damage is taken at 0 distance and 0 damage. So I'm assuming that if you turn this up, so it's at 0.1, if it changes to 0.8, that it will spread faster. Damage threshold, the amount of damage which will cause a chunk to fracture, break free. So I'm going to lower this number so it's also super weak, change that to 0.2. Again, all of this is the goal, that we just cut through this thing. Oh, okay, so we're getting there. Now it looks like glass, which is cool. So it is working, and the only problem is it's bouncing us back. And most of those things can be fixed by just tweaking these settings. So yeah, so if you make something really weak, the player walks on it, and the player is physics enabled, then it should start to break, theoretically. It might only break when you jump, though, because physics is probably not being triggered if you're just walking, or at least the impact isn't. So there's a couple things you can do around that. But yeah, ask me specifically if you need anything with that. What other questions? Anything else? No? Okay, well in that case, for the next 50 minutes, you have lab time to work on this stuff and then work on your projects for my class as well. All right?
Are the yappiest, the kids are the scrappiest, the jokes the snappiest, the folks the happiest way back home. Don't know why I left the homestead, I really must confess. I'm a weary exile, singing my song of loneliness. The grass is the springiest, the bees are the stingiest, the birds are the wingiest, the bells are the ringiest.